Imagine the lights going out, and I don't just mean in your house. I mean across an entire country. Actually, two countries. That's exactly what happened on April 28th, 2025. It was, without a doubt, Europe's worst blackout in 2 decades. And today we are going full-on forensic. We're going to tear apart the official incident report and see, second by second, how the entire Iberian Peninsula just went dark. All right, so let's set the scene. It's a pretty normal spring day in Spain and Portugal. The sun is out, renewables are just cranking out huge amounts of power for the grid. Everything seems fine. And then at exactly 12:33 in the afternoon, bam! Everything just stops. The entire peninsula is plunged into darkness. Now, this wasn't some kind of slow-motion failure. We're talking about a total system collapse that happened, well, practically in the blink of an eye. And that, right there, is the million-dollar question. This wasn't some rickety, outdated system we're talking about. This was a modern, sophisticated, high-tech grid. So how on earth did it fail so catastrophically? Well, the official report lays out all the clues, and we're going to follow them one by one. You know, a collapse this big almost never comes out of nowhere, and this one was no exception. In the hours leading up to the blackout, the system was basically sending out distress signals. So let's take a look at those first crucial warning signs. So to really get what went wrong, we first have to talk about this thing called grid stability. The best way to think about it is like a giant, continent-wide high-wire act. It's this constant, incredibly delicate balancing act between the power being made and the power being used, all happening in real time. And on this particular day, that high-wire act was getting really, really shaky. The final report shows that these really strange oscillations, you can think of them like tremors or wobbles in the electrical frequency, they started popping up all over the grid. This was the first major clue that the whole high-wire act was in serious trouble. And what's super interesting here is that it wasn't just one problem. Nope, they were dealing with 2 different kinds of wobbles at the same time. On the left, you see this local, high-frequency shudder, mostly happening inside Iberia. But then, on the right, there's this much slower, broader wobble that was actually shaking the connection between Spain and the rest of Europe. The grid was being attacked on 2 fronts. So the grid operators, they see these wobbles, and they jump into action. And as the report states, the things they did, they worked. They stopped the oscillations. But, and this is the absolute key, those very same actions had a massive, unintended side effect. They started jacking up the electrical pressure, the voltage, all across the Iberian grid, basically setting the stage for the disaster to come. Okay, and this is where everything goes from bad to truly catastrophic. The system is already stressed out, the voltage is way too high, and now we're entering the final 80 seconds. This is the literal countdown to collapse. Just watch the clock here. At 12:32 sharp, the voltage starts to spiral out of control. 57 seconds later, boom, a key transformer trips. Just 19 seconds after that, safety systems trip over 700 megawatts of solar power. 2 seconds later, another 900 megawatts of generation is gone. 3 seconds after that, the entire peninsula is cut off from Europe. And then, just 2 seconds later, it's over. Total collapse. Let's actually see what this cascade looked like. So at 12:32 and 58 seconds, right after that first transformer tripped, you can see the voltage is high, that's all the orange and yellow, but it's kind of contained. The system is definitely stressed, but it's still hanging on by a thread. Okay, now watch this, just 19 seconds later. Look at that. Thousands of megawatts of power have just vanished offline, and that dangerous overvoltage, that bright red you're seeing, is spreading like a virus all through the system. And here it is, the final, fatal blow. Just 1 second later, the overvoltage crisis completely engulfs the entire southern region of Spain. At this point, there's no coming back. The fight is over. The system has lost. So the grid collapsed. We saw the how, but what about the why? Well, the investigation found there wasn't one single smoking gun. Instead, it was a perfect storm, a deadly combination of a bunch of different vulnerabilities all lining up at the worst possible moment. To really get to the culprits, we have to quickly talk about something called reactive power. The easiest way to think about it is as the pressure in the electrical pipes that keeps voltage stable. On this day, that pressure just went completely haywire. The system had way too much of it, and that's what caused the voltage to spike out of control. So what exactly caused this perfect storm? Well, it was a whole chain reaction. You had renewable plants that just weren't pulling their weight in regulating voltage. Some of the old-school conventional plants weren't providing the backup support they were supposed to. You had safety settings that were way too sensitive, tripping generators offline way too early. And the cherry on top? Thousands of small rooftop solar panels across the country just automatically disconnected, basically pouring gasoline on the fire. And here is the truly tragic part of this whole story. The system actually had the tools to save itself, but it just couldn't use them fast enough. This chart shows all the untapped potential there was to absorb that dangerous extra voltage. Look at all that gray, all that unused capacity. Help was there, ready to go, but because of a mix of technical settings and procedures that were too slow, it just never arrived in time. But hey, the story doesn't end with the collapse. The recovery effort was absolutely massive, and honestly, it holds some really important lessons for the future of all of our power grids. I mean, bringing a modern grid back from a total blackout, it's an incredibly difficult job. Operators had to use these special black start power plants to create tiny islands of power and then very carefully, piece by painful piece, stitch the entire grid back together, all while syncing up with power coming in from France and Morocco. And you know what? Despite how complicated it was, the restoration was remarkably quick. The entire system in Portugal was back up and running in just 12 hours. Spain took a little longer, but was fully restored in 16 hours. That is a real testament to the incredible skill of those grid operators. Ultimately, what happened here wasn't just a Spanish or a Portuguese problem. It was a warning shot for the entire world. It proves that as we shift to new sources of energy, we can accidentally create new, unexpected ways for things to break. And that leaves all of us with a really critical question. How do we build an energy grid that's not just cleaner, but is also a whole lot stronger?